You know, something Jim Haney from the IMB shared in his reflections really struck me.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He was talking about this conversation with a man named John. And John said, you know, Jim, if it were not for the churches in Africa, our denomination would be exhausted and spent.
Wow.
Yeah, he went on. In Europe and increasingly in America, it seems many churches are burnt out, but in Africa, things are buzzing. It really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It really does. That kind of stark contrast. Vibrant growth versus, well, feeling spent.
Absolutely. And that sort of brings us right to what we're digging into today.
Yeah.
These church planting movements, or CPMs.
Right.
Think of them as these rapidly multiplying networks of churches,
Yeah.
often starting in really unexpected places.
Organic growth, really.
Yeah. And the author we're drawing from today, Haney, he contrasts them with what he calls, pretty strikingly, the chosen frozen.
Or fading stars. Yeah, I saw that.
Right. More traditional church structures, maybe. He describes these CPM churches almost like new stars born under the pressure and heat of a dark universe.
That's powerful imagery.
Isn't it? Emanating bright, radiant light.
Yeah.
It's compelling stuff.
It is. And that key idea is the rapid multiplication, right? It's not just adding one church here or there.
No, it's different.
It's a movement
Yeah.
where new faith communities are constantly being started, often by, local people themselves.
Exactly. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really understand how these movements are, well, how they're assessed. How do organizations figure out if this is really happening?
Right.
And we're drawing directly from the experiences of Jim Haney, who's the Director of Global Research at the Southern Baptist International Mission Board, the IMB.
So getting into the nitty-gritty of their process, understanding the origins, how they work, the impact.
Yeah, exactly that. Okay, so where does this whole assessment thing even begin? What's the trigger?
Well, typically it starts with word getting around, reports coming in about significant church growth happening somewhere.
Like within a particular people group.
Exactly. They might refer to it as an emerging church planting movement. It's that initial news, that sort of inkling that something really significant might be starting.
So it's that buzz John was talking about, but maybe on a larger scale?
Yeah, kind of.
So what happens then after those first reports trickle in? Do they just, immediately send a team out?
Not quite that fast. The first step usually involves Jim Haney and his global research team. And Dr. Jim Slack is mentioned too, IMB's consultant for field services and assessments.
Okay.
They start by looking at this new information, but they put it in context. They compare it with their historical data. Looking at growth patterns in previous reports, stats, narratives from their own teams and other partner groups too.
So they're checking if this new buzz is actually statistically significant.
Yeah.
Compared to the norm.
Precisely. You need that baseline, right? To know what normal growth looks like before you can say something is, well, exceptional.
Makes sense. What's next after the data check?
Well, a really crucial step is consultation. They talk to their own field leadership, the people on the ground,
Right.
and other partners working in that area. They want to get that firsthand perspective. Does what they're seeing match these reports of a potential CPM?
So multiple lines of evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really only when you get multiple positive reports stacking up saying, yeah, something real seems to be happening here, that they start thinking about a more formal assessment.
Okay, so it sounds pretty measured. They're gathering different viewpoints before they commit resources to a full-on assessment.
Definitely.
So once they do decide to go ahead, who actually gets picked for this assessment team? Who goes out there?
Right. So the source lays out a pretty typical structure for the assessment team. Usually you've got two people from the global research staff.
Okay, the research side covered.
And one of those researchers serves as the team leader. So you've got that research rigor baked in.
Got it. Who else?
Then, critically, field leadership helps identify 3 field practitioners. Now, this is important. These folks have to have personal, hands-on experience with CPM-style church planting.
Okay.
Within the same broad affinity group or people cluster, shared culture, language, that kind of thing. But, and this is key, they can't be currently working with the specific people group being assessed.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You want people who really get CPM dynamics,
Right.
but aren't maybe too close to this particular situation.
Right.
Keeps it objective.
Exactly. That's the idea. Experienced but objective eyes.
Are there other people involved Any other roles?
Yeah, sometimes, depending on the specific situation, they might bring in additional guests, people with specialized expertise or maybe unique experience relevant to that context.
Okay.
And of course, you need the logistical support, translators, drivers, people
Ah.
who know the local area and can, make things happen on the ground.
So it's a carefully put together team, different skills, different perspectives.
Mhm.
Once the team is formed, what happens before they actually hit the ground and start interviewing people? Is there prep work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a really important pre-assessment preparation phase. The team leader guides this.
Okay.
And a key tool here is something called the Church Planting Movement Assessment Guide. It's developed by Global Research at IMB.
Right.
The team leader gets this out to everyone, explains its purpose. It basically provides a framework.
Like a roadmap for their investigation.
Sort of, yeah. It gives structure, helps the team think about the key areas they need to explore, what questions to ask, what to look for.
Okay.
And along with the guide, team members get copies of any existing reports about this potential CPM. They study those.
To get some background.
Exactly. The idea is to see how the information they already have lines up with the different sections in the assessment guide to build a kind of preliminary picture.
So they're trying to get a good lay of the land before they even arrive.
Oh, for sure. And the team leader really pushes them to go beyond just those initial reports, to actively look for other relevant documents, anything that helps understand the context better.
Okay.
And as team members find things, share insights, analyze, you kind of get this collective document library emerging for the team.
So it's collaborative, building that rich picture together from what's already known.
Right.
Before they actually head out, what's the final step in this prep phase?
Well, the team leader works to get everyone on the same page about their actual assessment approach. How are we going to do this?
Right.
They revisit the core parts of the assessment guide. What's our purpose here? What research methods are we going to use? Quantitative, qualitative?
Mm-hmm.
What information sources are reliable? And really importantly, what are the security issues? They need total alignment on how they'll conduct this, especially since it can be sensitive work.
Security must be a huge factor in some of these contexts.
Oh, absolutely critical.
Ah.
The source really stresses this. They have to thoroughly discuss all the assessment plans with the field leadership before anyone sets foot in the field for the assessment itself.
Why is that so crucial?
Well, you need to make absolutely sure the assessment process itself doesn't accidentally put the movement at risk or jeopardize any other work going on or, endanger personnel. It's only when field leadership gives the full green light that the team actually proceeds to the field.
Okay, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So they've done the homework, the team's ready, security's cleared, they arrive on location. What happens in those first couple of days?
Yeah, the source talks about a 2-3 day on-field orientation. This is really important. It's the first time the whole assessment team is physically together for this specific assessment.
Right.
It's time for, initial groundwork, but also team building.
So it's not just about sorting out logistics, it's
Yeah.
about them gelling as a team.
Precisely. The orientation usually kicks off with introductions, getting to know each other, and significantly, a time of prayer, kind of grounding themselves in the purpose, understanding God's work. The team leader is focused on building unity, not just among the assessors, but including the translators and drivers, too. Everyone's part of the team.
That's important.
And another goal is to make sure any local field staff who might be around don't accidentally front-load information.
Yes.
Like, unintentionally bias the assessors before they've had a chance to see and hear things for themselves. You want fresh eyes as much as possible.
Right, you want their assessment based on their own direct observations.
Exactly. And a big piece of this orientation is massaging that assessment guide, adapting their approach. They won't just walk into interviews reading questions off a sheet.
No, they wouldn't feel natural.
Right. So they discuss how they'll get at the information needed to address the 4 main purposes of the assessment. How do we find out if it's really a CPM? Through natural conversation.
Okay.
They also sort out practical things like how they'll document stuff. Are they taking detailed notes during interviews or writing them up immediately after, recording, things like that.
So tailoring the plan to the specific place and people.
Mm-hmm. And often during this orientation, they'll decide to split up, maybe into smaller teams, 2 or 3 assessors, plus a driver, a translator.
Why split up?
It lets them cover more ground, maybe focus on different geographic areas or different streams or strands within the potential CPM. This can be really valuable later for comparing notes.
Ah, yeah. See if the patterns hold across different parts of the movement.
Exactly.
Okay, so the teams are formed, The plan is adapted. They're finally ready to actually sit down and talk with people involved in the movement. What do those interviews usually look like?
Well, typically, at each place they visit for interviews, the team plans to spend about 2 days.
Okay.
When they arrive, they usually meet with a local host, maybe a regional leader, a district leader within the movement.
When do they talk to that leader? Beginning or end?
It's flexible, actually. Could be right at the start or maybe after they've talked to others. Depends on the situation.
Okay. And when they meet with the regular folks, the believers in the community?
If it's a small group, they might do a group interview. But the recommendation is often, if it's a larger gathering, to break them into smaller cohorts.
Like how?
Maybe men in one group, women in another, sometimes even children if it's appropriate. The idea is to capture a wider range of voices and experiences.
That's really insightful. Different people in the community will see things differently, won't they?
Absolutely. Men's experiences might differ from women's, for example, and the whole emphasis is on making these interviews feel personal, unhurried.
Not like an interrogation?
Definitely not. Assessors are encouraged to share a little about themselves, build some trust. The thinking is, if there's a real, genuine movement happening, people will likely share their stories pretty naturally.
So it's less about sticking rigidly to questions.
Well, they usually have a few core questions they've agreed on, questions they want to try and ask everyone for consistency.
Okay.
But beyond that, it's about letting the conversation flow, seeing where it goes. And, the source notes, you should expect hospitality. Be prepared to spend time, probably be offered tea.
Huh, yeah. Sounds like a very relational way to gather information.
Very much so.
And it doesn't just end after that first meeting, right? There are follow-ups.
Often, yes. After the first day of interviews, the team might meet with their local host again to plan follow-up visits, if it's possible.
Okay.
So the second day is frequently used for visiting people in their homes. These might be some distance away.
What's the value of the home visit?
It gives you a different perspective, doesn't it? You see people in their everyday context. Plus, you might get to meet other believers who couldn't make it to the first group meeting. It fills out the picture.
Yeah, I can see that, getting a more complete view. And throughout these interview days, the assessment teams are debriefing internally, right?
Yes, constantly. Each assessor is taking their own notes during the day. Then, at the end of the day, the smaller teams get back together.
And compare notes.
Yeah, share what they heard, what stood out, key learnings, observations. This is really crucial.
Why is that?
Because it helps them spot emerging themes early on. Maybe they need to adjust their questions for the next day or probe a certain area more deeply. It's also where they start synthesizing all the information.
Because that's like this cycle. Gather info, reflect, adjust, gather more info.
Exactly. It's an iterative process,
Okay.
and they keep going until they reach a point where they feel like they're not hearing significantly new things anymore. Saturation, kind of.
Got it. And then eventually all the little teams come back together for one big final debrief.
Precisely. That full CPM assessment team debriefing, the source describes it as a really significant time. Often starts with prayer again.
Okay.
It's a moment to really reflect on everything they've seen and heard, to give thanks for, the new connections made, the needs they observed, the new disciples, just getting a deeper sense of what God's doing there.
Sounds powerful. And the team leader guides this big debrief with specific questions.
Yes. They facilitate the sharing from all the different sub-teams. They pose some pretty direct questions to pull out the key insights.
Like what kind of questions?
Well, things like, who did you actually talk to? What did you hear? What was amazing? What was disappointing? Simple but important.
Yeah.
Then more analytical ones. What did you learn about the history, nature, and extent of the movement? Is church planting actually happening?
Yeah.
Is it sustainable? Is it indigenous?
Getting into the core CPM characteristics.
Right. Are churches rapidly multiplying?
Right.
Is the faith and practice of the people biblical? Are there elements of what we'd call syncretism creeping in?
Oh, that's a key one.
Definitely. Also, what were the key factors that helped this movement grow? What challenges has it faced and how did they handle them? What interventions or help might actually support its continued growth?
Wow.
And then the big one. Based on everything, is this a church planting movement?
That's a really thorough set of questions. It really forces them to synthesize everything and make a judgment call, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's designed to get right to the heart of whether this is a genuine, thriving, multiplying movement of faith and what its characteristics are.
Okay, so after this intense debrief, everyone goes home.
Yep.
Then what? The report.
Exactly. The whole team heads home, and then the work begins on producing the final confidential report.
How long does that usually take? And who gets to see it?
Typically, the report gets finished within about 6 weeks of that debriefing.
Okay.
The team leader usually takes the lead on writing and pulling it all together, working with the team. It probably goes through a couple rounds of edits, making sure it's accurate, clear, and the final version. It goes to the assessment team members themselves, obviously, then to leadership within the IMB, and importantly, back to the field team, the people working directly in that region.
So the people on the ground get the feedback.
Yes. And often they'll also create a sort of sanitized executive summary. More general for broader sharing, but without any sensitive details that could compromise security or individuals.
Got it. Carefully managed information. And what's the ultimate impact of these reports? What do they achieve?
Well, the source highlights that these reports have genuinely had a significant impact. They've helped shape IMB's strategies, their approaches to mission work around the world.
So they really use the findings.
Seems so, but maybe the biggest takeaway, the thing that comes up again and again, is just this powerful confirmation that God is doing some amazing things among his peoples, and he is moving mightily in church planting movements.
Wow.
There's this real sense of awe, and gratitude for getting to partner with people who are witnessing this kind of thing firsthand.
It really does sound like a remarkably rigorous process, but also thoughtful. It blends that research discipline with the kind of irreplaceable value of field experience.
Yeah, and guided by prayer and discernment, too, it seems.
It's trying to get an accurate picture, isn't it? Understanding these really vibrant expressions of faith and figuring out how best to maybe support them.
Exactly, striving for that accurate understanding.
So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to that first observation from John. The contrast between the buzzing churches in one place and the burnt-out ones elsewhere.
It's provocative.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the factors? What creates that dynamism in some places and not others? And what can we actually learn from the experience of these CPMs, these new stars?
Yeah, it's a big question.
And maybe, just maybe, could those principles of assessment we talked about, that careful observation, seeking diverse views, really trying to get at the core dynamics, could you apply those principles to understand growth and vitality in other areas too, even, outside religious movements entirely?
That's an interesting thought, applying that methodology more broadly.
Yeah, it definitely gives you something to think about.